Have you ever noticed how losing 20 bucks feels way worse than the joy you get from finding that same 20 bucks? Well, today we're going to dive deep into the fascinating and frankly kind of irrational way our minds deal with gains and losses.
So let's start with a really simple question. I want you to think about it for a second. Which of these two things has a bigger emotional impact on you?
For almost all of us, that feeling of losing 50 bucks is just awful, right? But finding 50 bucks, well, it feels good, but is it as good as the other feeling was bad? Not even close. So what is going on here? Why isn't it balanced?
Well, this isn't just you. It's not some random quirk. It's actually a fundamental, core principle of how our brains are wired. It's a cognitive bias that shapes so many of our decisions, and it has a name.
It's called loss aversion. And the idea is pretty straightforward. The psychological sting of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing. It means our brains are basically hardwired to play defense, to prioritize avoiding a loss over chasing a gain.
Yeah, that's right. The research points to a multiplier somewhere around 2. Just let that sink in. The negative feeling has about double the emotional weight. That is a huge imbalance in how we experience the world.
Now, this powerful idea, loss aversion, it's a key part of this absolutely groundbreaking framework called prospect theory. It was developed by two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, and it completely changed how we understand the mental accounting we all do when we're faced with a choice.
So prospect theory really stands on 3 pillars. First, everything is judged from a reference point. Usually that's just where we are right now. Second, there's diminishing sensitivity. The difference between getting $10 and $20 feels huge, but the difference between getting $1,010 and $1,020 barely registers. And third, the star of our show today, loss aversion. Losses just loom so much larger than gains.
Okay, so how does this powerful bias show up when it comes to the things we actually own?
This reluctance is a perfect example of loss aversion in the wild. Because when you stop and think about it, giving something up, selling it, whatever, our brain automatically frames that as a loss.
Have you ever felt this? You try to sell something, an old gadget, a piece of furniture, and you just feel like nobody is offering what it's really worth. Why is it so painful to part with our stuff?
Well, the answer is something called the endowment effect. We literally place a higher value on things just because they belong to us. Selling that old mug isn't just a simple transaction. Your brain codes it as a painful loss. And because losses hurt twice as much, you demand a higher price to make up for that pain. A price that's often way more than you would have paid to buy it in the first place.
And what's really interesting here is that this effect is way stronger for things we actually plan to use, like your favorite coffee mug or that comfy chair. The thought of losing it feels personal. But for things that are just held for exchange, like all the shoes in a shoe store, the effect is super weak. The store owner doesn't feel a pang of loss with every pair they sell. For them, it's just business.
And make no mistake, this bias goes way beyond just money or stuff. This principle that bad is stronger than good touches pretty much every part of our lives.
Psychologists call it negativity dominance. Negative things, events, emotions, feedback, they just hit us harder and stick with us longer than positive ones. Think about it. It can take years and years to build a good reputation, but one single screw-up can bring it all crashing down. Even in marriages, research shows that success is less about creating big, positive moments and more about avoiding the negative ones.
This even changes how we work towards our goals. There's this famous study of New York City cab drivers. On rainy days, when business was booming, they'd hit their daily income target really fast and then just go home early. But on sunny days, when it was slow, they would work incredibly long hours, grinding it out just to avoid the loss of not hitting their number. The goal itself becomes the reference point, and falling short feels like a failure we will fight like crazy to avoid.
Okay, so let's see how all these pieces, loss aversion, reference points, come together to create this really fascinating and weirdly predictable pattern in how we think about risk.
So first you need to get these 2 psychological forces. There's the possibility effect. This is what makes a tiny 0.001% chance of winning the lottery feel so much different, so much more exciting than a 0% chance. We get obsessed with that tiny possibility. And then there's the certainty effect. This is our love for a sure thing. We will often pay a huge premium to go from a 99% chance of success to a 100% guarantee.
Okay, so when you combine those forces with our feelings about gains and losses, you get this 4-fold pattern. Let's start bottom left. A low probability of a big gain makes us risk-seeking.
That's the lottery ticket. Now, bottom right, a low probability of a big loss makes us risk-averse. That's the insurance policy. Okay, now to the top. When there's a high probability of a big gain, we get risk-averse. We fear disappointment, so we'll take the sure thing. But here's where it gets really weird. Top right. When we're facing a high probability of a big loss, we suddenly become risk-seeking. We'd rather gamble on a small chance to lose nothing at all than accept a definite, slightly smaller loss.
So, what is the big deal? What's the main takeaway from all of this, for how we should think about ourselves and the choices we make every day? Well, the big takeaway is that we're not these perfectly logical robots that some economists imagined. They called them econs. No, we're humans. We're driven by these predictable, powerful, and sometimes kind of weird psychological biases. Our choices are constantly being shaped by where we start from and by this deep, powerful, gut-level need to avoid losing what we already have.
And with that, I'm going to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Now that you can see this pattern, now that you know it exists, where in your own life, with your money, in your career, in your relationships, even with the junk in your closet, where is loss aversion secretly making the decisions for you?